Welcome to Tucker Carlson
and
tonight.
I think it'll be
we want to take the next hour and go inside the issues, looking beyond for a moment just the day's breaking news. There's a lot of it. But instead, assess some of the bigger issues that are coming to define our life in this country. We're going to open tonight with another look at what has been this year's biggest story, immigration. Without much real public debate or even discussion, the elite left has reached a conclusion on the question, and it's that America needs more immigration, much more immigration without limit. And we shouldn't worry about whether the people coming here have skills that we need, whether they're educated, whether they can speak English even, or even whether they're violent criminals. In fact, we shouldn't even try to accurately count how many are coming here or how many live within our borders. Do you disagree with that? Well, then, in the words of one MSNBC commentator, you're pure evil. Watch.
Donald Trump, without a doubt, is pure evil. No other country in the Americas has walls. No other country in the world separates children from their parents.
Pure evil. The thing about pure evil is you can't reason with it. You can't negotiate with pure evil or reach some kind of compromise with pure evil. Pure evil can only be destroyed by force. Given that, it's not surprising that the left is now mobilizing to harass, fire, and if necessary, physically attack anyone who disagrees with them on immigration, because the other side is, again, pure evil. For example, after chasing DHS Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen out of a restaurant earlier this week in downtown Washington, activists now showed up at her home. But zoom out for a moment. Why exactly does America need more immigration? Everybody says it does, but do we really? Does more immigration help ordinary Americans? Does it improve the country? Or does it just enrich an elite class, the policymaking class, at the expense of everyone else? Very few people are asking that question, but one who is Michael Anton. He just wrote a piece in the Washington Post asking, why do we need more people in this country anyway? We thought that was a good question. So we're kicking off tonight's special with Michael Anton. Michael, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Tucker. I'm very glad to be here.
Well, I was grateful that you pulled back a little bit and asked the macro question that undergirds all of this. Do we really need a flow of more than 1 million new people into America every year? What was your conclusion?
Well, my conclusion is let's look at the answers that people give for why and examine them, and they don't really bear close examination. So reason number one tends to be we need them we need workers. We have all these jobs. We need workers. And that sounds kind of plausible when we have a low unemployment rate for the first time in a long time. But remember, that low unemployment rate is an achievement of the Trump economy coming after 20 years of wage stagnation and even wage declines for working and middle-class Americans. So I remember the 90s when the Clinton administration were seeking tight labor markets, and their argument was, if we have tight labor markets, wages are going to go up for the core Democratic constituencies, working people. Democrats don't care about that anymore because they're not the party of labor anymore. They're the party of oligarchs, essentially, and they like more immigrants because they want to push wages down. So the jobs argument doesn't really hold up. Another argument is people will say, well, we need more immigrants because of declining birth rates and in particular to fix Social Security or our entitlements. That doesn't really hold up because by that logic, you'd have to say, you know, workers will always have to outnumber retirees, which means population growth forever, which means what's the upper limit on the U.S. population? We're now at over 300 million, 320, 330 million. 500 million, a billion? They don't want to answer that question. They just want to say, no, we have to keep doing what we're doing. No examination possible. It's really kind of crazy, honestly, that we can't have this debate.
Let me pause you there. So when people say that we need more immigrants to float our social safety net, what they're really saying is our social safety net is a Ponzi scheme, and that the people at the end of it are going to get shafted, right? It's not sustainable without an endless flow of poor people.
In 1967, a Nobel Prize-winning economist who had not yet won the Nobel Prize but would later explicitly called Social Security a Ponzi scheme, and he meant it as a compliment because his assumption, this is the mid-60s with a booming economy and a growing population, he said the greatest Ponzi scheme ever devised is a growing country. So the assumption is the country's just going to grow forever. That includes population. I don't know about you, but I find a lot of parts of the country are pretty crowded as it is. Traffic's really bad. Housing prices are very high. Why do we want to make it more crowded, housing prices more expensive, school systems more stressed? I never hear a very good or convincing answer to that.
Well, I don't hear the argument actually at all. I don't hear an argument about immigration. What I hear, and you pointed this out, I thought, really well in your piece, I hear not a policy debate, but a religious argument. If you're for the side that I'm taking, you're a good person. If you're against it, you're a bad person, or pure evil, as they say on MSNBC.
Right. I think people, they try to make the point that America has been welcoming in the past. Previous waves of immigration have served America well, and there's a lot of truth to that. There was a time when America made humongous acquisitions of land, and our political leaders in the past thought that they needed more people to help go settle and farm that land. That made sense. There was a time during the Industrial Revolution when factories were booming and business was expanding at a rate that exceeded the ability of the present population to fill those jobs.
Yes.
And we welcomed a lot of immigrants in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. There's a rationale for that at those times. What's the rationale now? Those two filling up the land, that doesn't hold anymore.
You're right.
The frontier was declared closed by the federal government in the late 1800s. So, I mean, where do we...
I think you're asking the most basic question that nobody asks, and I'm really glad that you did, and I hope that your piece today sets off a national conversation on the subject. Michael Anton, thank you for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
Well, instead of encouraging that conversation, which is important, I think, Democratic politicians are now pushing rhetoric that is getting more extreme by the day. New York gubernatorial candidate Cynthia Nixon recently declared, for example, that ICE is a terrorist organization. Watch this.
ICE has strayed so far from its mission. It's supposed to be here to keep Americans safe, but what it's turned into is frankly a terrorist organization of its own.
Jumaane Williams is a New York City councilman. He's running for lieutenant governor of New York State and could share a ticket potentially with Cynthia Nixon. He joins us tonight for our special. Mr. Williams, thanks a lot for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with being honest about one thing that I think Michael Anton is right about. We're, most of the time we talk about immigration, having a religious debate about who's a good person, who's a bad person. So if we could, for the next 4 minutes, let's keep this to policy.
Sure.
Tell me how bringing more immigrants into your neighborhood, I think it's East Flatbush in New York, helps the people who already live there. Immigrants and citizens, the people who are already there, how are they helped by it?
Well, I'm very proud to be the son of immigrants, and I'm very proud that the majority of my constituents are either immigrants or their parents are immigrants. I think that's the wrong question. The question many of us are asking is, why do we have to use overwhelming force, resources, and draconian measures to rip up families for an issue that at best is akin to graffiti or a parking ticket? That's the question that we're asking.
Well, but I'm not sure that it is, and that's why and I think you're asking a fair question, but let's get to the deeper question, which is, why is our current immigration system good for the people who already live here? So if we decide, for example, that mass immigration and mass illegal immigration hurts Americans, then it's worth being pretty tough, I would say, on the border. So why don't you explain to me why the people of East Flatbush, who are dealing with overcrowded schools, who are dealing with public transportation that's falling apart, that are dealing with rising rents that are making them move, how do they benefit from more immigrants living there?
Well, again, I actually still believe that immigrants to this country have and still do benefit this country. The reason I'm trying to flip back is because even if I conceded to your argument, let's pretend that somehow it's harmful. How harmful is it? Is it worth
Well, I'm not actually making an argument. Sure. I'm asking you a question, which is the most simple and most basic, the foundational question. How does this help Americans, our people, and you don't have an answer to it?
No, I think
I find that really interesting,
but I think that's that is not the foundational question. So we disagree on what the foundational question is. And so if I'm conceding, if for the sake of your argument, there is some harm, it is akin to writing graffiti on the wall or akin to getting a parking ticket. And so the question
But you're not proving that. You're just stating it. So, for example, housing prices are a huge problem. And you're a liberal, I'm a conservative. But we can agree that housing prices in New York are hurting people. Your people are being hurt by housing prices going up.
The question is...
Why does an influx of immigrants make prices go down? No, it makes them go up.
The question is...
Do you know that?
In my state, 1% of the population makes 45% more than the bottom 99%. That's not immigrants. We have more millionaires and billionaires that came out of the recession than before. That's not immigrants. Black people came into the recession with the least amount of wealth, and they lost the most. Those aren't immigrants.
That's true.
we're going to...
No, but you're absolutely right, and I actually think that's a huge problem. But let me ask you this. Who supports mass immigration more? Poor black Americans or rich people on the Upper East Side of New York? I know the answer. Let me blow your mind and tell you the rich people support it more because they get cheap housekeepers out of it. And the people in your district who were born in this country see it as a threat to them because it is a threat to them.
No, but
and you're not representing them if you don't recognize
speaking,
that.
the people who support the ripping up of the families and the child detention centers are doing it because they're saying their life is made worse. But who's making that life worse is not immigrants. And so the 33,000 Americans who are going to be shot and killed this year are not immigrants. They are Americans. And so what my question is, why are we spending more on ICE than any other federal enforcement agency combined to do this?
Okay, but we're arguing apples and oranges.
Sure.
I'm just kidding. We're almost out of time, but really quick, can you name a specific way that flooding East Flatbush with immigrants, poor immigrants, will make the lives of your people, the people who live in your neighborhood, better, the Americans?
Listen,
how would it improve their lives?
I'm running for lieutenant governor. The current lieutenant governor has said that she would turn people over to ICE. And so she kind of leans toward you when it comes to immigration. But my fundamental point here is that we are spending overwhelming force, draconian money, on something that is akin to graffiti.
Right, no, I get it.
But it's important.
You don't like it, but you can't tell me how bringing these people in helps Americans because we both know it doesn't matter.
I always congratulate you on your conflation of issues. It's great. You shouldn't stop. But it's just not.
I'm not
it's just not the
anything.
issue at hand.
I'm asking the basic question.
Me
We're
too.
out of time, unfortunately.
Thanks for having me.
Councilman Williams, thank you. Brandon Judd is the president of the National Border Patrol Council, and he joins us tonight. Mr. Judd, thank you for coming on. So first, I've got to ask you how, at the end of this week, when you and people like you have been compared to Nazis on CNN and MSNBC all week, what's your reaction to that? How does that make you feel? How does it make the guys you work with feel? What's morale like after a week like this?
Oh, first off, I'm absolutely disgusted that somebody would compare ICE agents, Border Patrol agents, CBP officers to Nazis who actually murdered people. What we're doing is we're enforcing the law in a very humane way. We're doing it the way Congress asked us to do it, and we're doing it in an effort to protect this country and to protect those citizens in the United States. Look, I've met with the Angel Moms. I'm grateful that President Trump met with the Angel Moms today, and to hear their stories and to find out how horrible that they feel because they're really ripped apart is pathetic. To think that people in our own country would disparage their law enforcement officers and agents that are only trying to help them.
So you're seeing Democrats running for office in this fall's midterm elections. We interviewed one of them last night, running on abolishing ICE because they say the agency is immoral. How do you respond to that?
Notice how they don't use facts. You know, your last guest, he said that ICE is the highest funded law enforcement organization in the federal government. That's absolutely false. ICE is actually a very small organization. The United States Border Patrol is much larger than ICE. CBP is much larger than ICE. But what they do is they don't use facts. They use rhetoric, and they're trying to scare people. And the facts, when